As I walk down the streets of a place I've lived my whole life, I feel I know every inch of my surroundings. The buildings and signs that hang outside may have changed or faded over time, yet the memories still burn bright and fill this space with the colour and noise of my mind. It's all too easy to stay here, safe in the knowledge of what I recognise and love, yet in order to move forwards, sometimes you need to take a step into the unknown. Welcome to the Hyundai Ioniq 5N, the electric car that will change the hot hatchback goalposts forever. It has 200 brake horsepower more than its fastest petrol-powered equivalent, hits 62 miles an hour in the same time as a Ferrari 458, and weighs more than an Audi RS6. It's everything we've come to expect from an EV performance car, but also plenty of what we haven't. But to find out what that is, we need to leave the bright lights of Seoul and find the closest thing we can to the Welsh mountain roads, as petrol heads have flung our hot hatches around for as long as we can remember.
Yes, this is more like it. I don't know about you, but I'd never associated South Korea with great driving roads, but this place is mega. It's got hairpin bends, sweeping corners with camber, the lot. And just maybe Hyundai has made an EV that's just perfect for it. Top line stats are as follows. 2 electric motors combine to produce 641 brake horsepower and 546 pounds-foot of torque. 0 to 62 miles an hour takes 3.4 seconds. Top speed is 161 miles an hour. In a Hyundai, I cannot think of another brand that's had a bigger image transformation over the years than this one.
And guess what? They're not done with the shape-shifting yet, because the Ioniq 5N has a number of very clever tricks up its sleeve.
Now, I don't want to run over things that you already know, but bear with me here. Petrol performance cars can either be front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, or all-wheel drive, and they each have their own characteristics as a result. This thing, though, can be all three.
Using the N-Torque distribution mode, you can move the powertrain through 11 different settings, ranging from fully rear-wheel drive, fully front-wheel drive, and somewhere in the middle to make all-wheel drive.
The result of this is that I can go into tackling corners like a front-wheel drive Honda Civic Type R, or an all-wheel drive VW Golf R, or a rear-wheel drive old-school BMW M140i. We know the downsides of EVs when it comes to having fun behind the wheel, but this is definitely one of the advantages that you simply cannot get in a petrol car. And it works brilliantly.
So far, so good then, and we haven't even spoken about one of the Ioniq 5N's biggest strengths, and it has nothing to do with it being an EV. It looks spectacular. I mean, yes, it's boxy and angular, but I love it. It looks like something out of Cyberpunk. And I even think that around the front light design, there's a bit of DeLorean in there, which is obviously super cool. Now, I'll give you some numbers because this is 20 millimeters lower than the regular 5, and it's also 50 millimeters wider at the base to accommodate the larger tyres, which are 275/35 21-inch Pirelli P0s, for those that want to know, and it's also 80 millimeters longer thanks to the larger rear diffuser.
Now, I think it looks good in any colour, but this Ecotronic Grey Pearl and the Performance Blue in particular is a nice standout finish because it highlights the orange accents around the front bumper and the side skirts and the rear diffuser. Just love it.
The interior isn't quite so bold, but you do get Hyundai N seats positioned 20mm lower, a very round Alcantara-clad steering wheel and knee and shin padding to keep you comfortable on track. And as always with Hyundai, there's plenty of physical buttons, and not everything is done via the touchscreen. Case in point are some of the drive mode settings, and trust me, there's a lot of them. The Hyundai i30N had over 1900 different combinations, and I'm pretty sure that this thing has even more. And the first button I want to talk about is obviously the big red one in the top right hand corner of the steering wheel, because it says NGB on it, which stands for N-Grin Boost. It's a terrible name, but what it does is it gives you the full 641 brake horsepower for up to 10 seconds at a time. So it's like a nitrous boost almost, and it's obviously very important. Then top left, we've got the drive mode selector, so eco, normal and sport, nothing kind of crazy about that. But bottom left and bottom right, we've got the N custom mode buttons, and this is where it gets interesting because these buttons allow you to save 2 preset configurations of drive modes to your personal preferences. So it's a little bit like the M1 and the M2 buttons on BMW M cars. And if you want to change the configurations behind this, you need to go into the infotainment system. So as well as being able to change things like the steering weight and the adaptive suspension and the throttle response, you can activate a few interesting features such as the N eShift. And what this does is it turns the paddles behind the steering wheel, which in an EV would usually be used to change the regenerative braking settings, it turns them into gear shift paddles for a fake 8-speed DCT gearbox with an actual rev counter and a fictional rev limit set at 8,000 RPM that you can hit and it will bounce off. It adds, or it's supposed to add, another layer of engagement, and it basically functions just like a regular gearbox, but obviously it's fake, it's all in the software. So that's quite interesting, can't wait to try that out. There's also N launch control, which kind of does what it says on the tin, but it's got different settings for the road grip level, so you can have low, medium and high, so whether I guess you're on gravel or a wet surface, you can change it there. And then another one, we've got N battery preconditioning. And essentially what this does is it controls the temperature of the batteries depending on whether you want to do a short burst of acceleration, so in a drag race, or you want to do sustained laps on track where it'll keep the batteries nice and cool. N Active Sound Plus, another option. We've seen this before on electric cars, but on the Ioniq 5N they've gone into a little bit more depth. So you can change the sound, the fake sound that the car makes, and it pipes in through the speakers. So you've got 3 different settings here. You've got ignition, which is kind of like, you can just hear it going on now. That's kind of like how a petrol car would sound. You've got evolution, which is the future sound of an electric N car. And then you've got supersonic, which sounds like a fighter jet. Now I'll just turn that off so it's not playing in the background. And I've been reliably informed that this backstory behind a couple of these settings is really interesting because the supersonic sound, which is supposed to sound like a fighter jet, the reason that that was included in this car is because the engineers at the time of developing it were watching the Top Gun film, the remake, and they really, really liked it and they wanted it to sound like a fighter jet. So that's why that's in there. And then the evolution sound is actually the sound from the 2025 Hyundai Vision concept car, which was in Gran Turismo. So it's basically a fake sound which has then become real in a real car. Okay, so moving on, if we come out of this menu and then go into another menu, I told you it was very, very thorough, we can see more options that come up, and we've got N Race, and that is similar to the battery preconditioning because it manages whether you want to do
a short burst of power, again in a drag race or sustained laps, so that manages how much power is being apportioned to the given activity. So obviously on a drag race you want to use everything to make it as quickly as possible, but then on track you want to leave it so that you can manage more than 3 laps, for example. The N torque distribution, we spoke about that earlier. The N drift optimizer, now if you activate this and turn off the ESC, what this does is it primes the car for, you've guessed it, drifting. And within that we've got a torque or clutch kick function where you pull the paddles both at the same time, foot on the accelerator, release them, and that acts like a clutch kick. The only issue with it is that you obviously need to have your hands at 9 and 3, which if you're going to go sideways, sometimes you want to prime your hands in a different position. So just worth bearing that in mind. And the last thing I want to talk about is the N pedal mode. And what this does is an extreme version of one pedal driving that you obviously get in a lot of EVs. So you basically don't need to touch the brakes, and what the car will do is it will brake really heavily coming into corners when you come off the accelerator, put the weight over the front end and make the car feel super agile. And actually the throttle response in that mode is supposed to be really precise as well. So I can't wait to try that out too. I think there's probably more to talk about, but it is going to get dark soon and I do want to drive this car, so that's what I'm going to do now.
Hyundai has clearly gone to town with the gadgets and tricks on the Ioniq 5N, but we know that that only gets you so far. After all, this is a large 2.2 ton car, and when it comes down to fun, that's not usually a good thing. So, what's it really like to drive on the road?
Well, it may be big, it may be heavy, and it may be hella complex, but this is still awesome fun. It really is. I mean, we knew it was going to have a sense of humour. It's got a button that says N Grin Boost, for goodness sake, but mechanically feels good. It feels sorted.
Hyundai openly describes the regular Ioniq 5 as an SUV, so turning it into an EV hyperhatch required some hefty modifications. For example, the body in white has 42 additional welding points and 2.1 meters of extra adhesives. The motor and battery mountings have been reinforced, and the front and rear subframes are enhanced for lateral rigidity. There's also a specially tuned power steering system, electronic controlled suspension, and integrated drive axles front and rear.
You might think that with all those changes, it might feel Frankenstein-esque, like there's too many ingredients. But it doesn't. Right here, right now on this road, nothing feels out of place. There's obviously huge levels of straight line performance. I mean, it's honestly Tesla-esque in the way it accelerates, but the E-Shift really adds a layer of engagement. I mean, look at this. Second gear now, third, fourth, and then third, second. It's really good fun, and it's got a proper hard rev limiter, kind of. The weird thing is that if you turn it off and you go back into it being like a single gear, it starts to mess with your head. You're expecting there to be a pause in the acceleration, and there never is. It's like stepping onto an escalator that isn't moving. Actually makes you feel a little bit queasy.
The N pedal is also surprisingly good fun. It generates up to 0.6 G of decelerative force and really encourages you to be precise with the accelerator. And because it puts the weight right over the nose, the turn-in speeds are, well, quick.
There's so much enjoyment to be had from just using the N pedal and building up a rhythm and really being super precise with how you're using the accelerator. You really feel like you're getting into it.
The reason the Ioniq 5N works is that while the technology and features are clever and new, there's still a properly engineered hot hatch underneath. No, it wouldn't translate anywhere near as well without the experience improving tech, but the bottom line is that it provides a level of engagement that we've rarely, if ever, seen from an EV.
And yet, it still does all the things you'd want from a regular Ioniq 5 EV. You simply put the drive mode into normal or eco, and it's quiet, it's spacious, the tech's good. And although the ride on this is pretty firm, not terrible, but pretty firm, there is going to be a European tune coming, so I won't make my final judgment yet. But aside from that, it's such an easy car to drive and live with. You know, I thought this thing was going to be pretty cool, a bit of fun, almost a nice novelty, but the Ioniq 5N goes way beyond that. And this is coming from someone that hasn't really been sold on performance EVs before. This thing moves the game on, there's no doubt about that. I'm seriously impressed.
The Ioniq 5N specialises in combining elements that mimic what we know and understand, such as E-shift and engine sound effects, with original ideas that are only possible with an EV, such as the N-pedal and the ability to switch between rear-wheel drive and front-wheel drive. It adds up to making an exciting blend of elements that we know and others that are entirely new. Costing from £65,000, there's no getting away from the fact that it is expensive, and it's light years away from the original form of a hot hatch. But don't forget that far less powerful petrol rivals such as the Mercedes-AMG A45S are a similar price. It's expensive, but you're not paying a premium for the electric powertrain.
I don't want to end this review by going into a grand declaration on the future of the performance car or how Hyundai may be the saviour, because A, that's a bit deep when I'm on a 9-hour time difference, and B, I think it kind of misses the point, because it's not about this car being a good performance car for an EV. It's not that, it's a brilliant performance car, full stop. And I've driven a lot of very quick EVs. They're stunning in a straight line, and a lot of them are very capable in the corners, but being blunt, they get a bit one-dimensional and boring after a while. But this thing, I've been driving it for 2 days now, and I'm still attacking corners with it in exactly the same way that I was when I first got in. It is still putting a huge smile on my face. And whether this is a sign of things to come for performance cars, I don't know. Time will tell. But right here, right now, this thing is honestly awesome.